The bank's attorney said it plainly, in a lobby full of people, on a Tuesday morning in February 2023. He said, "Mr. Pruitt, you have 30 days to vacate, and I would strongly encourage you not to waste those 30 days. There were 6 other people in that lobby, a teller behind the glass, a woman with a stroller near the door, 2 men waiting for the coin machine, a security guard who looked at the floor, a young woman from the loan department who had been called down to witness the exchange and who would later say she wished she hadn't been. Eugene Pruitt was 67 years old. He had driven 31 miles to this branch in Decatur, Alabama to say in person what he had already said twice by certified mail. He was wearing his work boots, which he had polished that morning before he left the house. He held his hat in both hands at his waist. He looked at the attorney. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "All right." He put his hat on and walked out. The attorney watched him go. He turned to the loan officer and said, quietly but not quietly enough for the teller not to hear, "These old farmers think they own something because they worked it long enough." He said it with a small smile. He drove back to Birmingham that afternoon. He had 14 other files on his desk. By Friday of that same week, Eugene Pruitt's attorney had filed a single motion in Morgan County Circuit Court that identified a defect in the loan instrument so fundamental that the bank's own legal team would spend the following 72 hours trying to determine whether it could be corrected. It could not. The loan was unenforceable. The foreclosure proceeding was withdrawn. Every dollar Eugene Pruitt had paid against that loan, $187,400 over 22 years, had to be addressed. This is how it happened. Eugene Pruitt had not inherited anything. There was no family land, no family name attached to acreage in any county, no grandfather with a deed in a safety deposit box. What he had, at age 22, was $1,400 in a coffee can under his bed and a job driving a hay baler for other men's farms in Morgan County, Alabama, at $6 an hour in 1978. He had grown up in a house his family rented. His father had rented his whole life, 3 different houses in 3 different counties, moving when the landlord raised the rent or sold the property or simply decided he wanted someone else. Eugene had watched his father pack boxes 4 times before he turned 18. His father died in 1992, owing 2 months of rent on a house in Hartselle. He left nothing. There was nothing to leave. Eugene had decided at 22, with his $1,400, that he was going to own something before he died. Not a lot of something, just something no landlord could take back. It took him 9 years. He drove the hay baler. He picked up fence work on weekends. He did not buy a television until 1983. He did not eat at a restaurant for 6 years. He kept his money in that coffee can, and then in a savings account at a credit union. And then, when the savings account reached $11,000, in 2 savings accounts, because he did not fully trust any single institution with everything he had. He kept a notebook. He wrote down every dollar that came in and every dollar that went out in the same blue ink pen he bought by the box from the feed store. He went through 4 notebooks between 1978 and 1987. In March of 1987, he bought 94 acres in the south end of Morgan County, Alabama, for $68,500. He put $19,000 down, every dollar he had, and financed the remaining $49,500 through First Alliance Savings Bank of Decatur at a fixed rate of 9.25% over 30 years. He signed the papers on a Thursday. He drove out to the land that same evening alone and walked the fence line until it was too dark to see. He had been working that land for 36 years when the bank's attorney found him in the lobby. He had cleared the eastern 40 acres himself with a rented brush hog and 3 straight weeks of work in the summer of 1989. He had built the equipment shed in 1993 with lumber he milled himself from timber he cut on the property. He had installed 2,200 feet of fencing over the course of 7 years, a few hundred feet at a time, as he could afford the materials. He had drilled a well in 2001 that cost $14,000 and had not failed since. He had planted 600 pecan trees in 2004 on the southern slope, which had been producing since 2012, and which he harvested every October with the help of his neighbor's son, a boy named Marcus who was now 24 and had grown up helping with the harvest. He had paid his loan payment every single month for 22 years. Same amount, same day, the 12th of every month. He had never been 30 days late. He had, on 3 occasions when cash was tight, paid partial installments and then made up the difference within the same billing period. He had the documentation for all of it. The bank that held his loan was not First Alliance Savings Bank of Decatur. First Alliance had failed in 1994. Its assets, including Eugene's loan, had been acquired by Meridian Trust Corporation in 1995. Meridian Trust had merged with South Central Bancorp in 2003. South Central Bancorp had been acquired by Consolidated Regional Bank in 2011. Consolidated Regional Bank was the institution whose attorney had stood in the lobby on a Tuesday and told Eugene Pruitt he had 30 days to vacate the property he had spent 36 years building. The stated reason for the foreclosure was a disputed escrow balance of $6,200. The attorney's name was Douglas Hale. He was 44 years old and held a law degree from the University of Alabama, class of 2004. He had been retained by Consolidated Regional Bank's Loan Enforcement Division in 2018 and had handled 38 foreclosure proceedings in the 5 years since. He was known inside the division for efficiency. He resolved files. He did not lose hearings. He wore pressed suits and carried a briefcase that contained, at any given time, the documents for whichever cases were active that week. The Pruitt file had reached his desk after the bank's internal collections process had stalled. Eugene had disputed the escrow calculation by certified mail in October 2022. The bank's escrow department had responded in November with a statement reaffirming the balance. Eugene had responded in December with a counter-calculation, line by line, showing that the bank's own payment history records, which he had obtained under the loan servicing disclosure rules, showed no escrow shortfall. The bank's collections department had passed the file to Hale in January 2023 with a note that read, "Borrower is disputing. Recommend enforcement posture." Hale reviewed the file. He saw a 67-year-old farmer in a rural county disputing a $6,200 escrow balance on a 30-year loan. He had seen this before. He had a motion for foreclosure prepared within the week. He filed it on a Tuesday. He had not, in reviewing the file, examined the chain of assignment documentation for the loan instrument. There were 4 assignments. First Alliance to Meridian Trust in 1995, Meridian Trust to South Central Bancorp in 2003, South Central Bancorp to Consolidated Regional Bank in 2011, and 1 internal reclassification within Consolidated Regional Bank in 2017 when the loan had been moved to a different portfolio category. There were 4 documents that should have been recorded in Morgan County, Alabama, to establish Consolidated Regional Bank's standing to enforce the loan. 3 of them had been recorded. 1 had not. The 2003 assignment, Meridian Trust Corporation to South Central Bancorp, had never been recorded in Morgan County. It existed as an internal document. It had been executed. It had been notarized. It had simply, in the course of a large institutional merger, never made it to the county recorder's office. That gap meant that Consolidated Regional Bank's chain of title to the loan instrument had a broken link. Under Alabama law, a party seeking to enforce a mortgage must hold a perfected assignment chain recorded in the county where the property is located. Without the recorded 2003 assignment, Consolidated Regional Bank could not demonstrate standing to foreclose. Eugene Pruitt had not known this on the Tuesday the attorney spoke to him in the lobby. He did not have a legal background. He had a high school diploma and 4 blue ink notebooks from the late 1970s. What he had was a lawyer named Patricia Odom in Hartselle, Alabama, who had been handling property matters in Morgan County for 31 years, and who, when Eugene called her that Tuesday afternoon, asked him one question before anything else. She asked him, "Who actually holds your loan right now, and can they prove it?" Eugene went home. He went to the small room at the back of the house he used as an office, where a metal filing cabinet stood against the wall. Gray, 4 drawers, the kind sold in office supply stores for $89. He had bought it in 1991. Each drawer was labeled by year range in his own handwriting, the letters small and careful. He pulled the second drawer, 1995 to 2004. He had kept every document related to that loan since the day he signed it. Every payment stub, every statement, every letter the bank, or any of its successor institutions, had ever sent him. Every piece of certified mail, with its return receipt stapled to the original envelope, including every notice of assignment. He had received a notice when First Alliance transferred his loan to Meridian Trust in 1995. He had received a notice when South Central Bank Corp sent a letter introducing itself as the new servicer in 2003. He had received a letter from Consolidated Regional Bank in 2011. He had put each one in the correct drawer and forgotten about them the same way you forget about something you've already handled. Patricia Odom came to the house the next morning. She sat at the kitchen table and went through the second drawer with Eugene, document by document. She found the 2003 letter. It was a standard servicer introduction notice on South Central Bank Corp letterhead, dated March 14, 2003. It stated that the servicing of Eugene's loan had been transferred from Meridian Trust Corporation to South Central Bank Corp effective April 1, 2003. It included a new payment address. It was signed by a vice president of loan operations whose name no longer appeared anywhere in South Central Bank Corp's institutional history because South Central Bank Corp no longer existed. Odom pulled up the Morgan County property records on her laptop at the kitchen table. She searched the assignment recordings against Eugene's parcel number. She found 3. She looked for the 4th. She searched by grantor and by grantee. She searched by instrument type and date range. There was no recorded assignment from Meridian Trust to South Central Bank Corp. Not in 2003, not in any year. She looked at Eugene. She said, "They don't have standing." He asked her what that meant. She said, "It means they can't foreclose. They can't prove in the public record that they own the right to enforce this loan." He said, "They've been collecting my payments for 20 years. She said, "Yes, and we're going to talk about that too." She filed the motion on Thursday. One motion. It identified the gap in the recorded assignment chain, cited the controlling Alabama case law, and stated that Consolidated Regional Bank lacked standing to pursue foreclosure proceedings against Eugene Pruitt or the property at any address in Morgan County. Douglas Hale received the filing on Friday morning. He read it before 9 a.m. He pulled up the Morgan County Recorder's database himself. He searched for the 2003 assignment. He searched 3 different ways. He called his client at 9:22 a.m. The call lasted 31 minutes. Consolidated Regional Bank's internal legal team spent the following 72 hours examining whether the unrecorded assignment could be corrected retroactively. Their outside counsel's opinion, delivered in writing on Monday morning, was that a retroactive recording in 2023, filed after a motion challenging standing had already been entered in court, would not cure the defect for purposes of the pending enforcement action. The chain was broken at the point of enforcement. That was the point that mattered. The foreclosure proceeding was voluntarily withdrawn on Tuesday of the following week, exactly 7 days after it had been filed. Patricia Odom filed a second motion the same afternoon. The second motion addressed the question of what happened to 22 years of monthly payments, $187,400, made by Eugene Pruitt to an institution that, as a matter of recorded public law, could not demonstrate a perfected claim to receive them. The motion also addressed the question of whether the demand letter sent by Douglas Hale constituted a violation of Alabama's consumer protection statutes, given that the institution was not, at that time, a party with demonstrated standing to make such a demand. The matter was resolved through a mediated settlement 4 months later. The terms were confidential. Eugene Pruitt declined to say anything further about the numbers involved, then or since. What he would say, and did say once to his neighbor Marcus's father, a man named Darnell who had farmed the adjacent acreage for 19 years, was that he had kept every piece of paper because his father never had anything to keep. Darnell said he understood. Eugene said he thought maybe that was the whole thing right there. He called his daughter in Huntsville that Friday afternoon. Her name was Lena, and she was 38 years old, and she had been worried since the Tuesday of the lobby. She answered on the second ring. She asked him what happened. He said, "It's all right, Lena. It's going to be all right." She laughed. He heard it clearly on the other end. That sound, her laugh on a Friday afternoon, with the south field visible through the window where the pecan trees stood in rows he had planted himself in 2004, was what he would remember later when he thought about that week. He told her he would call her Sunday. He said goodbye. He set the phone down on the kitchen table. He sat there for a while. Then he got up and went back outside to do what needed doing. Tell me in the comments, if you'd been Eugene that Tuesday morning in the lobby, would you have kept your composure, or would you have said something back? I've been thinking about it since I read this file. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. A 69-year-old woman in Breathitt County, Kentucky, who received a notice that a gas company had filed an easement across her property using a right-of-way document from 1952. What she found in her late husband's files changed the outcome entirely. Paste your script.